And hello everyone, welcome back to another CSS tutorial, or in this case your final CSS tutorial. Now before we start this tutorial, I just want to make sure everybody know I'm primarily a backend developer, so I won't be making a bunch of CSS tutorials designing these beautiful looking websites. For example, if we go here and say CSS sexy website tutorial, you'll notice all of these people, they have their own videos. Web Dev Simplified is great for these types of things. And you can make the greatest looking websites. And there's a lot of people that already covered this topic, so it's not really needed for me to cover it as well. But these are out there as well. This is primarily a compilation of everything we have done up until this point. But there are a lot of channels out there that make these beautiful websites that you can follow along with, and that's how I used to get good with CSS before I started going to backend web development. But you can just look up how to make beautiful websites. Like here they have like this glass design. I love glass designs, so I always recommend this as well. It's also developed by Ed, also a great person to watch tutorials of if you ever have questions about some design related topics. Now that we have that out of the way, so if you haven't seen it yet, we have already gone through first tutorial where we did a couple of HTML, or we made an HTML page of our HTML skills. You can go follow that tutorial if you're still wonky on your HTML. If you're not, you don't have to follow that tutorial. We'll just be copying and pasting that code into our code. So you don't need to rewrite all that HTML. Also, in case you want, we also have a Bootstrap tutorial where we designed the website with Bootstrap instead of CSS. Anyhow, so let's get started. First, you want to go to my GitHub repo. Link to this is in the description. And you want to just download the zip or git clone it. I'm going to git clone it, but you can also download the zip and then just unzip it after you have downloaded it. Alright, so here we can just say git clone. Do that and it should clone it for us. Now we can just Nemo YouTube project. And this is just my file manager. So here we can bring this here. So first of all, if you want the code for the ending of this, you can just go here. There's the code. So right there for you. So if you just want that, you can get it. But if you want to follow along, you can just get yourself this code right here. So I'm going to go in here. In fact, let's copy this entire one here. We can say copy. And I'm going to go here, create a new folder. Or actually, let's paste that folder here. And then I'm going to call it CSS. You can call it whatever you want. I just like calling it CSS. And then here's our HTML. Now you can open up VS Code in here. So for me, I can just say code. And let's actually just go CSS. And I can say code dot. I have a VS Code tutorial if you're not good with VS Code. Alright. Now that we have this, let's first take a look at what we have. So if we open this up, now you might not have this option here, but you can just open up this HTML file inside of your browser. But I'm going to open it up with my live server. And we should see something like this. Now admittedly, this doesn't look too great at first, but that's why we're going to write some CSS to make this look better. So let's go here and we can take a look at our code. So first of all, if we were to take a look at our first page here, Blogger's Paradise, it just has a bunch of blogs. So in the like and the dislike button, a couple of links to show us our profile, and then where you can create a blog. And in here, again, we can take a look at it. We have a main and there's all our content. We have a footer and we have a div with IDs. And here are the source. We have font, awesome, and images. And we won't be missing too much of this. Okay, now first of all, let's create a new folder called CSS. This is optional. I like to hold all of my CSS inside of a CSS folder. Some people like to have a style folder and then a CSS folder inside of that. It depends on your project, in my opinion, but I like to do this. Then I would like to create a couple of CSS files. First, we can go global.css. This will keep all of our global data, like what we want our website to have globally applied. So first I like to go :root. And these are the variables. So this is our variables we want to use around the website. Meaning we can basically use text instead of having to type out specific hexadecimal values for colors. It can just prevent a couple of bugs and make it easier to change in the future. As an example, -- color primary, so the primary color is hashtag 109 FC3. You can of course change this color. I just thought this one looked pretty good with the existing white background. And then -- default padding is 1 rem. So whenever we want to add padding by default, I just want it to be 1 rem, because that usually is good enough for me. Sometimes I might mix it up a little bit, but usually this is good enough. Next up, we can have our global styling. So this will basically be applied to absolutely everything on our website. So if I were to go asterisk saying everything, margin 0, padding 0, and I believe we can also increase the size here a little bit. So this will remove the margin and the padding from basically all the elements on the page. If we were to go back to the page, we won't really see too much of a difference because we haven't actually imported anything. Now, because this is global styling, we basically want to import it inside of every file we have. So we go to index. Here we can say at the very bottom, link, and here that actually allows us to say CSS. And we can say css/global.css. This will import the global styling. We can do the same for post, and you can do the same for a profile. Now if we go here, you'll notice that it did change everything a little bit, but not too much, luckily for us. Next up, I want us to have styling for this navigation right here. Because this navigation, I want it to be the same on every single page we have. So I don't want it to change at all. For that, we can actually create its own styling file. However, some of you might want to put it inside of global.css since it will be applied globally. And others might want to put them inside of their individual CSS files. I will just put this inside of its own little style. So nav.css. Not everyone is a fan of this specific method, but I like to do this just because it keeps everything apart. I like having a bunch of files rather than 4 files with like thousands of lines of CSS. Alright, that also means we can import that nav.css inside of every file. Again, you could put this in global if you'd prefer that, because then you don't need to put an extra import. And then finally, we need to actually add a couple of classes and IDs to this nav. So here we could say ID, and I'd like the ID to be page-nav. Then for each li element, we can give it a specific ID. In this case, we can say active-link. So this will be the active link, so the page you're currently on. This will change depending on what page we are. And that is really all. We just need to add those 2 IDs. We can then copy this with its IDs, and you can just replace it in each other file. And then now if we go back here, nothing will really change, as you can see, but now we can start actually applying some changes. To make sure this page works or this CSS file works, we can just say nav and background color red. If the background color is red, which it is, it means it works. Perfect. So let's first style the page-nav ID, which we have here, as you can see. And also, before I forget, this active link, as I said, it changes per page. In this case, it will be here with the profile.html because we're in profile.html. And here, it will not be. And actually, this is profile. So it should be here. This one here is post, not profile. So let's remove that from profile and put it here, post. There we go. So each one of them are on their own, as you can see, own li, depending on what page it is. Okay, now here let's start styling. We can say padding. And here we can use our variable. Now take note, you should import the globals.css before the nav.css, just so nothing gets overwritten and it knows what it needs before it starts adding styling. So here we can say var -- default -padding, and then we can do the same for background color, and here we can call this color -primary. If we go back to our page, it will now look something like this. We can go to #page-nav, and we can select the first UL element. So to know how this will be nested, you just hover over it and you'll see element and then UL. So basically the first child that is a UL. This is optional. This is just so we can actually use this. So you don't need this. You could have just done this, would have been perfectly fine and done the same thing. Anyhow, then you can say display, and this will make the nav bar one single line instead of it going downwards like it is doing here. We want it to be one single line of content. And then justify content, space between. And then just to make sure we don't have these dots here, what we can do is we can say list style and make it none. This will make it look something like this. Then here we can say page-nav li #active-link a like this. So what this is basically saying is we get the page nav, then any li tag with the ID of active link. That's why there's no space here. Take note of that. So any li tag with this ID, select its a tag. Meaning, since only one of these li tags should have this ID, only one of them should be selected. And the reason we select a is to apply styling to this a tag here specifically and not to the li tag. So in this case, it will select this a tag because it's in page nav with the li with that specific ID, and there's the a tag. And here we can just say color #FFF. Now what this does is basically, so there's home, now profile is white, now post blog is white, now home is white. So a lot of times you want to do this with JavaScript, but in our case we did it very easily just using some CSS. So there's some cool functionality you can do with CSS. We can select #page-nav. And the reason we are always selecting page nav is so it never ever conflicts with any other styling on our website. This always makes sure it always selects the page navigation. Never anything else. A lot of people will just select an a tag, but that always selects all a tags on your website. You never want to do this. You always want to specify exactly what you want to change, because this will decrease the amount of times bugs will happen because some styling is being randomly applied to a different component or a different element. Anyhow, then we can say select the first UL element, select all the a tags in that unordered list, and we just say text, decoration, none. That should remove the underscores. Color, make them black. Transition, 300 milliseconds. This will just add a nice little transition to them. And then font style, italic. And then to make sure the transition works, we can copy this, paste it here, say :hover, so when the user hovers over that a tag, we get color #FFF. You might want to change this because currently our current active link is also white, so that's up to you what color you want this to be. Font weight bold, and all of these will be applied over a transition of 300 milliseconds, meaning it will have a nice short animation. As you can see, now this is how our things look. If we go like that, nice short animations when you hover over it, when you click on it, nice short animations. And that's really that for the navigation. Next up, we can finally take a look at our index.html. So create a new CSS file called index.css. And here we can, of course, just import index.css. Note, index.css should only be imported in index.html. Cool. Now here we can close that. The navigation has been styled on all of the pages. And in here we can finally take a look at the header. Now the header, we can give an ID of page-header. The H1 we can leave like that, and the P tag we can give an ID of page-subtitle, and the P tag here we can give an ID of page-featured post, and the header is basically just this part here. That's the header. And this should be good. We can then save this and go to index.css. And first, let's select hashtag page-header and add a margin top to 0.5 rem. Text align to center, and this will just make it look like this. Next, we can copy this, paste it, and then go hashtag page-subtitle. And in this case, I don't really want to see the page subtitle anymore, this right here. I later realized I don't really need to see it. One way we can do it is remove it from the HTML itself, or in the CSS, just say display none. And as I said, that will just remove it, so that's no longer there. We get in, go like this, and this time we can select hashtag page-featured-post. Margin top, set that to 0.5 rem. Font weight, set that to bold. Font size, set that to 1.1 rem. And the reason I'm using rem instead of pixels is just something I've really gotten into the habit of after the last couple of years. I just always use rem with everything, except for some very specific scenarios. But generally, I prefer rem because it is just a little bit safer than using pixels, because pixel density changes depending on the monitor you're using or the device, so it might not always look the same on all devices. This makes sure it pretty much will look the same for the most part. And in font family, and you can put anything here that looks good for you. I'm just going to select the first one because I think that looks pretty good. Then we go back here. This is what our header looks like now. Alright, then let's actually get to a page body where the actual juicy stuff will start happening. And that will be everything inside of main. So let's add the classes and IDs. So we can just say ID page-main-content. Here with this ID. And all of them will have the same class, so we can actually select multiple of them. Like that. And we can just select all the divs. I'm doing this by holding Control and then clicking. Go to the end of the div and say class equals topic-item. So all of them will have the same class. The reason we're giving them a class is because classes are for multiple items and ID is for one item. You should only use one unique ID for everything you want to give an ID. A class is if you want to apply multiple styling to multiple stuff. You should always keep that in mind when doing styling, because if you use ID on two different items but it's the same ID, you might get some weird bugginess with it. Alright, next up we can select this span here. And I'm just going to go like this and press Ctrl D to select all of the spans here. And that should have selected all of the spans we have. Yes, it seems like it. And for all of the spans, we can give them a class of topic item author. The next up, we can select all of the buttons. We can actually do this to make it easier to see. We can select all of the buttons. And all of the buttons will also have a class. So class equals topic-item-button. And then it'll also have another class. And this depends on what type of button it is. In our case, we're going to say like-button. So all of the thumbs up buttons will have this like button class, and all the thumbs down buttons will not have it. So in our case, we can actually just select this, and all of the buttons that has that, we can navigate back to, and instead of like, we can just say dislike, and if all went well, all of them should now have the same class. And yes, looks like it. Perfect. Now you also got a little bit of VS Code lessons in while we're doing some CSS. Alright, so that is all for this main content. Nothing will really change, but now they all have classes and IDs. Inside of index.css, we can now start with the body content. So we can say body content, just so we can split up and make sure we know where everything is. Because once I like to split my things up into multiple files, you don't want too many files, and this just makes it easier. Then hashtag page dash, page dash main dash content, which is right there. We want to select that and just say more padding var, and we can select our variable dash dash default dash padding, and this will just add default padding sizes to our main container here, which is 1 rem. Then here we can add dot topic dash item. This means for every topic item inside of main page content, we can add margin bottom 1 rem, background color to hashtag B9, B9. This is a nice grayish color. Bring in again, then add this padding there. Border radius 10 pixels. This will give it a nice round feel because more modern things are becoming more round. Transition of 1 second. And inbox shadow 1px, 5px, hashtag 000. So we're adding a 5 pixel spread here just to make it look nice and good. Now you take a look here. This is how they look now. If we refresh, now sometimes you get this nice transition in, but I guess in this scenario we don't. But okay, this is how they look now. Currently they still look terrible because we haven't really styled them much, but that is how they look. They also now have transitioning in them. We can then copy this, just remove the content, and this time we say dot topic dash item dash author colon before. So before rendering, we want to go content, and we want to add author to the start of this element here. So just take a look, this topic item author, that is here. And that should be within O, my bad, let me just select all of them. That should be all 4, there we go. So what we want to do is before this content starts, that's why we have colon before, we want to add author like that. But because we didn't have that in the initial HTML, it would be a pain to go add it manually back. But with the CSS, we can just add this colon before, and that will do this. So now all of them have author, and I should probably say colon space. All of them have author, colon, and then their author, as you can see. So I didn't have to add that manually, I just used CSS. Like a lot of these, you'll notice in the future, a lot of people will just use JavaScript for this, but they don't realize you can do a lot of this with just basic CSS. CSS is more powerful than you think, and it is more lightweight than JavaScript as well. Then we can just copy this, paste it here, and now I can add the general styling. So font style is italic, font size is 0.9 rem, margin bottom is 0.3 rem, and in display is block. The reason we're doing this is because span is by default a display of inline, which makes it kind of difficult to apply margin and padding style to it. So this right here. When we say display block, it will turn it into a block level element like a p tag as an example. And then you can easily add margins and padding to it without it doing weird styling issues. So now it looks like this. Without this display block, it will look like this. So there's no margin at the bottom. Okay, then here we can say dot topic item dash button. We can say padding 0.3 rem, margin top 0.4 rem. Now you'll need to remember padding is applied inside this button. So that gray area you see, that's going to be the padding. The margin will be outside of the button. That is why we add both. So one is to style the button itself, the other is to move the button away from the other content. Background color, #0000. The reason we add the extra 0 is to basically say make it invisible. This is another way of doing it other than having to specify transparent. Because this fourth value here, that basically is the opacity. So if you hover here, you'll notice the opacity is at the very bottom. We then say border, none, transition, 500 milliseconds, and font size is 1 rem. So now we'll see something like this. You already know why we have a transition yet, but now you'll see something like that. For the transition, we basically wanted to add a nice little transition when we want to select a specific color. Or when we hover over it, the color should transition nicely. And let's also add cursor pointer. This means that when we hover over it, our cursor should point with a finger. We can copy that, paste it here, and then we can say without a space dot like dash button colon hover. Now, as you'll note, this means that the item with this class should also have this class. The reason we do this specifically is to make sure not just any one of them with this like dash button class will get the styling. We only want those that have this class with it. And we just want to give it this color styling. And here we can say this like button, and we want to give it this color styling. So now, when I hover over it, it'll gain nice styling with a 1 second transition. Cool. Then when we go back here, I actually forgot to add a specific tag, and we only need to add one, luckily for us, because here we have a continue reading link, which I think looks kind of terrible by default. So we want to style that as well. So continue reading, here we have that A tag, and we can just give it in class because you might have multiple of these. Just because we have one doesn't mean it needs to be an ID, but you might still have multiple of these in the future if you were to work on this blog on your own. And we can say continue dash reading dash link. We can then go here to index, say dot, and also just select all of these, paste it there, and there we go. We can then say text transform uppercase. We want to make it uppercase. Text decoration none. This is to remove the underlining from it. And then we can select this again, and then we can go colon after, and we want to say content question mark. So basically we want to ask them continue reading. So now it will all be uppercase, no underline, and there will be a question mark at the end. And then finally we can just style our little footer here. So go to index.css, scroll all the way down, and just go ID page dash footer, and we just added some default padding. And now we have this. Next up, let's go to your profile. Oof, this is going to be a harsh one. So here we can then open profile.html, and let's close the others and create a new file called profile.css. Alright, so we don't need to style the navigation. We can just close that. We can also import profile.css. And we only need to basically style this form here. So here we can say ID. That can be profile. Then this field set, we can call it profile. ID, of course. profile dash info. Then this button here, we can give it a button of class edit dash button. And we actually want to give this class to all the buttons that has this class. So this button here at the bottom, as well as this button here. So we just scroll to the button and we paste that. And now all of them should have that class. This div here we can call ID profile dash photo dash container. And this image we can give it an ID of profile dash photo. And that's really all the IDs and classes we need to give. In profile.css, we can select hashtag profile, margin 0.5 rem. Then we can give padding to the profile-info here. There's default padding. This will of course make it just look a little bit finer. We can then select this, and then inside of it the dot edit dash button, background color transparent, border none, padding 0.1 rem, and a cursor pointer. This will make the edit button look something like this, which I think just looks a lot better than what it did. We can then select this, paste hashtag profile dash photo dash container. Then we want to try and align the image to the center of the screen, just because I think that would look great on both mobile and PC. So width 100%, so we're making the div 100%, not the image at this moment. Text align center, margin dash bottom 1 rem. This will do this, so it'll be centered the image. We can then select this and just select hashtag profile dash photo. Border radius, make it nice and round. Again, looks good, especially in the modern times when everything is nice and round. We'll make the width of the image 100%. Max width 500 pixels. This means if you're on a big screen, it's not going to take up the entire screen, which will be not really productive. So in this case, as you can see, but because we said max width 100%, if we were to resize the screen here, so we go like that, you'll notice the image shrinks with our screen. So on mobile devices, this will look a lot better. And that is really that for a profile CSS, just to make it look a little bit better. Next is for the post blog. So we go here, we select post.html, create a new CSS file called post.css. We close all of these. And then up here, we say post.css. Again, the navigation page has already been done. We don't need to worry about that. The form can have an ID of post-form. Then I want to split this input, or that label and this input, and these into their own containers. So that means we want div times 2. We want 2 divs. We can then throw them in there and take this label and text area, throw it in here. And we can remove all of the break line tags because now we're using CSS, so we don't need break lines because we can add them ourselves and decide when would be best to add them. All right. Then with these divs, we can give them a class of post-form-item. And for the bottom one, we can say ID for form-content. And at the bottom, you can just say ID equal post-button. Cool. Then in post.css, we can select the post-form. And we want to basically center everything. So let's go with 90 We don't want to go 100% because that would look a little weird. So we say 90% just to give it a little bit of a margin. Height 50%. Position absolute. Since this is the only thing on the page, absoluting the position isn't that bad. But usually I would always recommend going for something like relative instead. But in this case, since this is literally the only item on the page, absolute won't really be too much of an issue. We can say left 50%, top 50%, transform, translate, negative 50%. And if you remember this basically makes sure the center of this element is in the center of the page and not the top left part of the element. Because this will make the top left part of the element in the center of the page, whilst this will make sure the center of the element is the center of the page. Background color, hashtag B9, B9, B9. We could have made that a variable too, to be honest. Display flex, justify content, center, justify items, center, align items, center, and if you may not have noticed that you items, I'm trying to center all of the content. That's what all of this is trying to do, in case you didn't notice. Flex direction. This will be column, because once we want to center all of the items, we don't want them to be in a row, meaning from left to right. We want them to be from top to bottom. That's also why we have two divs, so those divs can be in a row if we need them, but the content in the div will be aligned in a column, so from top to bottom. Padding 0.5 rem. Border radius can be 20 pixels. Font weight can be 20 pixels. Font family can be Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif. Box shadow can be 1px, 1px, 5px spread, and in black. This will give us something like this. So everything's in the center. This here is in a row. This here is in a row. But these two content themselves, they're in a column because they are in their own divs. Next, we can select this post form item. So hashtag post dash form dot post dash form dash item margin dash bottom, and we want that to be 1 rem, width 100%, display flex, and this is to basically align the items in a row. It has 100% of width, meaning it can go from left to right, 100% of that width. We then want to center them, so justify content center. And actually there should be justify items center. Justify content should be space between, to add spacing between the label and the input. And then align items should be center. This will give us something like this. Doesn't look great yet, but we're getting there. We can copy that, go down here, say input. So we're selecting specifically the input. In our case, we're just selecting this element. We don't have any other inputs except for this one, but this one isn't inside of this div, so it won't be selected. So this here is the only input that will be selected. It might be best to actually just select the title, or the ID, which is title, rather than the input itself. But in our case, we can actually just select an element for once. And as you can see here, it will select this input inside of these elements. We can say width 80%, border radius 40 pixels, border none, outline none. Now outline is specifically, when I click here, you'll notice it goes a little bit black at the edges. That's an outline. So when you focus on it, it gets these black bars. We don't want the outline, so we just remove that. And in padding, 0.5 rem, 1 rem, 0.5 rem, 1 rem. There we go. So this is basically top, right, bottom, left. And we'll get something like this. We can then select post form item again, and then say hashtag form dash content flex direction column. This will just make it flex from top to bottom instead of left to right. Then we can select hashtag post dash form, and we'll just select we can actually select all of this again and say text area, border, none, outline, none, border radius, 10 pixels, padding 0.5 rem, width 90%, margin top 1 rem. And this will just make it look a little bit better than what it was, as you can see here. We can then finally select the post form and hashtag post dash button, which is the button here at the very bottom. Padding 0.6 rem, border radius 5 pixels, border 0. This is another way of basically saying border none. Font weight bold, box shadow 1px, 1px, 5px black, margin top 4 rem, cursor pointer transition 500 milliseconds. The reason we want the transition is because I want to add a hover effect. Background color black, and in color of the text white. So when you hover over it, you get this. And my bad, let's actually remove this margin top here. I did not mean to put that there. There we go. So now we have the post there, and if you hover over it, it turns black. Alright, and that's basically it. There's still a lot more we could have covered, such as media queries. So when someone is on a mobile device, we might want to convert this into a burger or a hamburger menu. Or we could have added keyframes to add more animations to the website. As I said, we also have a Bootstrap website. So if I were to just open it up, and let's just go here to post HTML, and we just stop that live server, and we take a look at the one with the Bootstrap on it. You'll notice it looks a little bit better. You also have more options up here, and in general, I think it looks a lot better than what we came up with the CSS. And then once it gets smaller, it also has, as I said, we could put a hamburger menu here, because once it gets smaller, nice hamburger menu, as you can see, and it just looks good overall. But you could of course always mix Bootstrap with CSS. That's usually how it will actually go. But in our case, this was just a CSS tutorial, and I recommend you go check out the Bootstrap one as well. We have a whole crash course on that. And yes, that is that. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed and learned something new. Maybe got a refresher on your CSS skills. And I will see you all again in the next tutorial, whichever that may be.